Hey folks, welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast Livestream 152 Q&A segment. We are ready to rock and also roll.
Yes, we are.
So let's do that.
Yeah, let us do this. We're going to start with a question from the Discord server, as we do every week. They vote on a question that they most want to see answered every week, and that's how we start our Q&A in those weeks that we do Q&A. Q's and A. This week, I'll just read it. I will say in advance, I've never heard this before. A doctor in New Zealand, Dr. Sam Bailey, challenges the very existence of viruses in the entire field of virology. Her main points: 1, no viruses have been proven to be transmissible from human to human. 2, methodology in viral studies doesn't follow the scientific method. 3, no controls were used. 4, they don't satisfy their own requirements.
Mom, you turned off your mic. Something.
No? It's on? Can you hear me now?
Not getting anything from you.
Okay.
Are you able to, you heard me though?
Yeah, I have you. Now it's working.
Now it's
unplugged.
unplugged.
Plug it back in, please.
How about now?
Yeah. Nope, nothing.
No.
Let me see.
No.
Do I need to take us off and restart?
Hold on.
How about now?
Yeah, looks like it's working that way.
All right. Yeah, you just need to.
Sorry.
Yeah.
about that.
Okay. Should I read the question again?
Yeah, this is the Discord question.
Yeah.
Take 2.
So from the Discord this week, we have the following question, which is on a topic that I have literally not heard of before. I have not heard this take before. A doctor in New Zealand, Dr. Sam Bailey, challenges the very existence of viruses in the entire field of virology. Her main points are: 1, no viruses have been proven to be transmissible from human to human. 2, methodology in viral studies don't follow the scientific method. 3, no controls were used. 4, they don't satisfy their own requirements. This perspective seems credible, but what do you think? Now, I don't know, have you heard of Dr. Sam Bailey?
I think I have run across this and I have a kind of a flat earth sense about it.
Yeah, and I think it's not quite flat Earth because individuals can assess the veracity of flat Earth themselves without any
Yep.
special technological anything. But at first glance, which for me it's what it feels like to me. But then it's also true that what we're being given is a summary by someone else of her main points, and at least in summary form, 3 of the 4 points as described are unassailable. Isn't maybe the right connotation, but you can't respond to them. Methodology in viral studies doesn't follow the scientific method. I feel like if I were given the task of going out and finding virology research that follows a scientific method, I would be able to find it. I don't know. I've never explicitly tried to do that, but
Yep.
I find that to be a blanket statement that is very unlikely to be true. No controls were used. When? For what question? I don't even know what that means in this context. 4, they don't satisfy their own requirements. Again, I don't know what that means. Don't satisfy whose own requirements by what standard?
So we don't know how much of this is a reporting problem in the question where they've been
As I said.
efficient in reporting and how much of this has to do with the research.
Right. And the first one, no virus has been proven to be transmissible from human to human. I don't think that's true, but I don't know.
Well, there's a question about can you elevate the standard of evidence so high that you can't meet it? Yes.
Right.
I will point out that the fact that no virus has ever been proven to be transmissible from human to human, even if that's true, does not say viruses don't exist. And in fact,
or that they don't transmit from human to human. Just because we haven't proved something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact is, bacteriophages exist, right? And coronaviruses exist too. It doesn't mean that they behave the way they are claimed to. But the point is, if the claim is viruses don't exist, then the question is, well, what's a bacteriophage? I've seen them.
Yeah.
right? So anyway, the point is something here is off. Now, I should go back. I did not mean to say it strikes me as flat Earth in the sense that it is equally easy to falsify. I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
What I meant was flat Earth is something I don't spend time on because it does not appear likely to be a fruitful use, right?
Yeah.
And there are other things that I don't think are right. As I've mentioned, I think the moon landing happened. I'm almost certain of it.
Right.
But going through the exercise of how many of these claims are possible for me to dismiss and discovering that actually there's some claims here that are a little troubling is useful. It's not a waste of time.
Right.
And so the question is, what is the likelihood that this one is going to be fruitful? And if the claim is viruses don't exist, my sense is already something isn't right.
No, and I mean, again, this isn't a fair, we aren't given a fair ability to assess Dr. Sam Bailey's work by being given a summary of that work by someone who is presumably not calling themselves a virologist themselves. So the question is given says that Dr. Bailey challenges the very existence of viruses. The only one of the main points provided that would seem to speak to that at all is no viruses have been proven to be transmissible from human to human, but that already imagines that viruses exist and maybe they just haven't been proven to be transmissible. So already we're at odds with sort of the fundamental assumptions of this. So I don't know. I really seriously doubt it, but I've never even seen this before.
So I would, as a cautionary tale, I would point out that I have reversed course a couple times on an issue that sounds like this one and then turns out to have depth to it. So Kary Mullis, Nobel Prize winning inventor of PCR, argued, and he was not alone, but he argued that HIV did not cause AIDS. And I remember when I first read that thinking, I know exactly what error he's making.
What error did you think he was making?
It was an overly narrow instantiation of what I think is called Koch's postulate. So Koch's postulate says if a disease causes a pathology, that nobody who has the pathology, or if a pathogen causes a pathology, then nobody who has the pathogen should not have the pathology, and nobody who's got the pathology should lack the pathogen, which is nonsense.
At least the second half. I'm not sure the first part of that is part of the postulate, but maybe.
I think it is, but nonetheless, the point is, look, if you do that too narrowly, here's the problem that you miss. The human body and every other animal is composed of a huge network of interconnected pathways. You can disrupt a pathway and anything downstream on that pathway is disrupted. So it is very possible to get a bunch of symptoms that are the result of the fact that you've interfered with one coenzyme or something that has disrupted everything downstream. And you can say, well, here are 16 things that go along with that pathology. And so the point is, well, are there more than one thing that could disrupt? Could a congenital mutation cause a disruption of that coenzyme, causing everything in that cascade to fail? Yeah. Could a pathogen interfere with some stage of production? Yeah. So the point is there could be multiple things that result in the same set of symptoms. And if you say, well, X doesn't cause that set of symptoms because here are some people who don't have X and do have the symptoms, then you blew it. So I thought that was the error he was making. It turns out that the argument against HIV causing AIDS is stronger than this, and that in fact, the answer is not that nobody's denying that HIV is a virus, that it is being transmitted, but the question is it essentially a fellow traveler, not significantly harmful in and of itself, traveling with something else that might be causing this pathology, or is it the causal agent in and of itself?
Yeah.
And anyway,
and there's if memory serves, a long chapter elucidating some of this thinking and history in Bobby Kennedy's latest book.
In The Real Anthony Fauci.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, I'm not telling you...
hard reading, but important.
I'm not telling you that I've reached a firm conclusion, but I'm telling you I initially dismissed Mullis because I thought he was a chemist who was not appreciating the complexity of biology. I now believe that the argument is a more difficult one to dismiss because how do you know when you are looking at a pathogen that is transmitted along with something else that you haven't yet identified and when it's the causal agent? Not as easy as you would think. So I leave open the possibility that there is more to this other claim than I understand, but at the moment, my first instinct is almost certainly not right and probably not fruitful to pursue it.
Yep. All right. Questions at darkhorsesubmissions.com. I chatted with a GPT AI today. What's GPT?
I've forgotten what it stands for, but this is a...
Do you know, Zach?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a protocol that is doing a pretty good job of passing the Turing test.
Turing test, okay.
Yeah.
I chatted with a Yes?
Continue.
I chatted with a GPT AI today and gave it a poem I wrote to evaluate. It reviewed the tone and message akin to what I was taught in school. So much of society's decision-making is algorithm-based, so I asked it if AI could replace doctors. It said AI couldn't replace empathy and intuition. What does it mean to be human?
Well, I too have interacted with this AI. I think the same one. I find some of the interaction so robotic and pedantic as to be reassuring, and I found other elements of the interaction a little bit shocking. What does it mean to be human? I believe that's one of those questions that you could chase your tail on forever. It's not. Yes, we can come up with.
Well, I mean, there's an historical answer.
Yep.
Right? Like, what does it mean to be a Felis sylvestris or a Homo sapiens? Right? There's a phylogenetic answer.
Yep, but there's nothing. Let's put it this way. Let's take your phylogenetic one and say that's going to be the answer. Okay.
I'm not saying it's the only. Obviously, that's not the only way to answer the question. But there is a way that is akin to answering, what does it mean to be a horse?
Right. But I guess my point is, like with the definition of species, you can come up with a definition that contains something really good, but you can't come up with any definition that you can't do away with pretty easily, right? Is a dead human a human?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking for is the essence of humans, what makes a human special, it ain't contained in the dead human.
But that's, maybe you find this a pedantic thing then, but I don't. The question isn't what makes a human special. It's just what does it mean to be human?
Right.
And so I'm just saying that one answer is going to be a phylogenetic one, and that's not the question that's being asked, but that is one answer.
It is one answer, and we could do 20 others, and
I don't know if that's true. So we could walk through all of the characters that which is phylogeny speak for characteristics, but the characters that various people have said is the thing that makes us different, right? It's language, it's tool use, it's war, it's empathy, it's theory of mind, it's tool, not just tool use but tool making, all of which are known in other species. So each one of these things is follow. But then,
making a fire.
Wrangham, I was just going to say, Richard Wrangham famously, and he's not the only one, but has really codified the hypothesis around fire making as the thing that basically catapulted us into fully modern humanness. And no, as far as we know, no one else does make fire.
But I would say it's a pointless definition too. If you found something else that did make fire, it doesn't change anything about humans. So,
right.
So what I'm actually arguing is that this question has a particular status, or should have a particular status of questions that if you decide that it ought to be answerable, that you effectively take yourself out of the running to do something useful, right? It should be possible to define what a human being is. I think Heather's come up with the only definition that works, but it's not useful. It doesn't tell you anything about humans that matters. It would also be true of an ancestor of humans, so early If you're using a lineage-based answer, then the point is you can come up with something that's so pre-human that you wouldn't call it human, and yet it's still part of the lineage. You can, have a human born without a brain, and so there's all kinds of technicalities you could throw at it. And the real point is, look, you have to kind of mature past this sort of question. You have to realize, and we do this in a couple places. Speciation is a real and important concept. Species is not. Species is a fraught concept. Genetic is an important and real concept. Gene is a fraught and not very useful concept. So
totally,
it's going to be one of these things where the answer is, well, it sort of depends. Give me the context for which you want to understand what a human is, and then in some of those contexts, we'll be able to come up with a definition that's useful. But if you're...
Well, I mean, this question comes with context, then. This question comes with context in which the AI evaluated a poem written by a human, and reviewed the tone and message in a way that the poem writer was taught in school. Now, the fact that AI can be taught to do textual analysis in a similar manner as high school students can be taught to do textual analysis actually doesn't surprise me. And that doesn't strike me as necessarily putting us at any risk of feeling like, oh, AI is encroaching on humanness. So much of society's decision-making is, depending on what the poem was, I guess, right? There are some poems that could be so abstract and so deeply about, human emotion and connection that might make me rethink that answer. But so much of our decision-making is algorithm-based. True, this is to our detriment at this point. Too many people are relying on algorithms and authorities to make their decisions for them, to relying on hackers to tell them what to say and how to say it. That feels like a perfect encapsulation. But then the question jumps to, so I asked if AI could replace doctors. AI could replace some of what doctors do some of the time. The thing that is getting less and less done by the medical profession is the thing that's hardest to do and most necessary for humans to do, which is diagnosis, which relies on not just objective lab tests and the readings from instruments, but engaging the human in front of you and watching their language, their body language, as they talk about this thing rather than that thing, and hopefully going to their home and seeing them interact with, their cat and their son, and seeing what is in their home and smelling whether or not there might be, a mold problem. Just like all of these things that an AI can't do.
Yeah, but doctors don't do it.
But they could.
Right. So there's a question about, could AI replace doctors? Most of them. There's also the issue of, even if the textual analysis was completely compelling, right? Was as good or better as you would get from the best humans. A human being would do this with the use of consciousness. That might not be all they're doing.
Right.
But they would do it with the use of consciousness. And what if you could simulate that with computing power? In other words, that the way it was done was radically different, that it would come up with an answer that you would take to be meaningful because it was, but that it didn't have an experience of creating an answer. It didn't know that it had to come up with an answer. It just knew that it didn't know anything. It pixeled on a screen, right? And so the point is, is it human? Nope. It's not, because no matter how well it simulates a human, it isn't one.
Yeah.
Right.
And so embedded in that is, awareness of your own self, theory of mind, empathy, which is one of the things the AI responded with, and intuition. Intuition being an interesting one, because some large part of intuition is keeping decent records on what you've experienced before, such that when you experience something new, you end up having the right gut feeling about it, but it's actually based on past experience. So that part an AI should be able to do really well.
Yep.
But if you're talking about the amount of material that an adult human being has actually experienced, and the vast majority of it that has been almost immediately forgotten, and asking an AI to sort of remember everything and sort through everything, well, we don't have that computing power, right? So already there's some kind of act of forgetting that is coded into the AI, just like we have coded into us forgetting.
Yep.
That we have no choice about. And the human who has coded what shall be forgotten that the AI might be taking in, if it had access to every part of a human experience, which we don't have that yet either, would be a different human consciousness doing that. So it would still be indirectly human.
Yep.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is good.
And that's not human at all.
But it is a people.
How's that?
I don't know. We refer to them as people.
Do we?
I do. He's a good person.
Ah.
But I mean it in the,
Yeah.
I don't mean he's a Homo sapiens.
No.
No, I just mean he's good people.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
You wouldn't accept most people doing that.
No, I really wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Do we need a conceptual update on madness in general? Celebration of mental illness is problematic, yet I'm not familiar with this word, SZSAZ, it's a name. Saz/Foucault's critique of the category as medical remains cogent to me. So I'm not familiar with the first, presumably, contemporary of Foucault's, another postmodernist. So just let me read the question again, surely mispronouncing Saz. Do we need a conceptual update on madness in general? Celebration of mental illness is problematic, yet Saz/Foucault's critique of the category as medical remains cogent to me. So I remember something from the past about Foucault talking about madness, but I don't remember what his point was.
Yes, I can't imagine that it was very good.
He was no dummy.
That's true.
He had some good points. So
Well, let's leave Foucault aside.
yeah.
Look, the human mind is complex. It will fail many, many different ways. Not everything that is described as mental illness is mind failure. And lots of stuff that might seem like it, if you're sufficiently ahead of your time, you may sound crazy, and nobody who thought you were crazy may be around to realize, that wasn't crazy, that was real.
Right.
So anyway, there's lots of room for us to misdiagnose people. There are cases of people having been committed to mental asylums who simply didn't speak a language that anybody recognized, and so they were understood to be babbling incoherently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this happens.
Yep.
But mental disorders are inevitable. Lots of mental disorders are downstream of novelty. We are creating mental disorders by not realizing that simple alterations to our environment have profound implications for cognition. They have profound implications for development. And this is relatively easy to prove. I mean, it's a Mike Mew kind of a point, right? What he says about orthodontia is true for mental illness in many cases, that we don't have to be creating these conditions, but because we have a dumb model, like, well, your schizophrenia must be the result of a bad gene, right? Right? No, sorry, development most of the time. But because we have these bad models, we fail to recognize what might be done about these things. The fact that I'm going to end up on a rant, but the fact that psychology is simultaneously a science and a clinical practice has been a total disaster. There are lots of things that you can do for a human being without imagining that you understand how they function.
Yeah.
And so, the clinical thing should be named differently. It should be practiced by different people.
Yeah.
But
Well, Actually, I'm not certain that it should be practiced by different people, is the conclusion that I agree with.
Well, trade-offs being what they are, you would imagine that if these are really two different skills, that the number of people who are good at both is going to be very low.
But the analogy, the obvious analogy, is going to be research and teaching in a modern university.
I am unconvinced that in a modern university these two things have anything to do with each other, and in fact they are counterproductive. The narrowing of study in becoming a degreed scientist, for example, means that you're probably not very good at teaching undergraduates the general perspective because you're so narrowly focused on some particular thing.
Yeah, but that is about the rise of the specialist class.
Yep.
And is a betrayal of what science should be. And all scientists, specialists though they may be, if they cannot pull themselves back, if they cannot change depth of field and focus enough to say, what does my whole field look like? And how does it look to someone who's never looked at it before? Then they are presumably doing something very, very narrow, and they can't see outside of their own silo enough to potentially see big errors that they themselves are making.
Right. But, I mean, my critique is two-part. In the modern context, I don't think the people who do research should be teaching anyway. I just don't think there's anything about the historical connection between the two things has been broken. The corrective would cause you to have scientists who were good at thinking and therefore good at conveying how to think about such problems. And so if you fix this
what?
So that teaching and research would be sensible together in a way that treating people and researching what's wrong with them are not closely related.
Well, now you're talking about psychology again.
I'm saying the parallel between the fact that professors teach and research and the fact that psychologists psychologize in the lab and treat people in the office is not a good parallel. The treat people for psychological distress, for example, is not fundamentally the same skill as researching the way the human mind works. And that thinking about scientific processes is the same process as conveying to others how you think about scientific processes.
It is, so I'm surprised to hear you say that researchers shouldn't be teaching.
Modern researchers.
So, but again, that's about the problem with modern science.
Right.
Not about an historical connection between research and teaching.
Right, but as I understood our argument, I was saying the psychological profession, the clinical profession, should not be the same thing as the scientific study.
So I think that they can be, that can work when, I think they probably should be called something else rather than just having the adjectival clinical put before psychologists, which most people miss and they don't recognize that that's a really different thing. A clinical psychologist and developmental psychologist are doing very, very different things. But requiring the clinical psychologists study other fields, non-clinical fields of psychology in their education before they go on to become people who see patients as opposed to do research strikes me as important if the fields of psychology know what they're doing.
Yeah, but I think we know that they don't.
Well, but again, if they know what they're doing.
But I don't think even in the modern era, the problem is the field is too young to be informative, right? It's like a caveman should, in principle, know geologic chemistry in order to flint knap. And it's like, you might get to a point.
Okay, but this is a different argument then.
No, I think my point is treating the ill fit between their minds and their life is a fundamentally different thing than looking into the human mind and understanding how it works. And could they eventually converge? Maybe. But the idea that these two things have been housed near each other doesn't make any sense. With respect to thinking scientifically enough to do research properly and conveying how to think about science to students, those two things should be the same, where psychology and psychology should not.
Well, they shouldn't be the same, but they should be closely related. research and teaching of
Let's put it
scientific
this way.
ways of thinking.
And I
ways
would
of
actually
understanding the
argue
world.
you probably get a benefit. You will
Yes.
pay some cost for saying, actually, you should be good at both those things.
Mm-hmm.
But you will get a major benefit for saying, actually, maybe we make an exception every now and again, but by and large, if you're good at thinking about this, you should be good at explaining it to others so that they understand how to think about it.
No, and this is a point that that Bob Trivers made to us back when we were undergraduates of his at UC Santa Cruz. Bob Trivers, one of the greatest living evolutionary biologists, with whom we were lucky enough to study as undergraduates, said when we were thinking about grad schools that we should really go someplace said not when we were looking at grad schools. With grad schools, it was about museums and having a museum, because a lot of people would come through and you get exposed to a lot of different viewpoints from a lot of places in the world. But that with regard to looking for a position afterwards, go someplace where you'll be regularly exposed to undergraduates.
Yeah.
Because they'll throw stuff at you, hopefully not literally, that you aren't expecting.
These days, they will throw stuff at you,
Right.
literally.
Back, when we were getting this advice in the early aughts, and the 90s, not so much. And then maybe Dick Alexander also said this, and then maybe it's one or both of them who said both of these things to us. I guess it wouldn't have been Dick who advised about the museum, but go someplace where you have regular interaction with undergraduates, because otherwise you're likely to get concretized. Like you're going to have some view that you leave grad school with, having been in this sort of wild west world of idea exchange, and if you're only ever seeing your colleagues interacting with the same people, training people who don't yet know anything necessarily, but are in grad school and know what they think they want to know, and then you go to one conference a year where you meet the same people who believe the same things, it's much easier to fall into a rut of, I know this thing, I'm an expert, the field that I belong to is awesome, and we already know all the things, and let's keep building little pieces of it, as opposed to being exposed to undergraduates who come in and be like, I don't get what any of it's about. Like, why do you believe X? And, the undergraduate may throw at you something that goes like, oh God, the foundation is rotten.
How do you know viruses actually exist?
Right. And so, that's why we get crazy sounding questions like that. And it's going to be easier to snip little bits of us sounding crazy to the uninitiated, because we don't simply dismiss it as that's obviously insane, right? Because there's almost nothing that's simply obviously insane.
There's some people who are simply obviously insane.
That's true. Okay. I don't know to what degree we got that, answered that question, but let's move on. Okay. This question came up a while back, and I would love to answer it, and I just don't have an answer, but I will ask it. I think I asked it before. Maybe I never even said it publicly, but we talked about it. I have been dealing with benzo withdrawal symptoms and looking for answers. Do you know of any research on benzo's effects on GABA receptors that you can point to, or researchers' names that come to mind? Love your podcasts. Thank you both. This is just outside of anything that I have done any direct research on, so I don't know. This is the sort of thing that if there are those in our audience who do know, leaving comments in the video, and hopefully we then see those, not because we go there, but someone sorts them for us and shows us things that we're supposed to see. That could be useful, although I wish that I had an answer, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't have anything either, but maybe crowdsourcing it will point us to something.
Yeah. Okay, women tend to marry up. Game theoretically, a lineage that could only be passed down through the mother would keep advancing in society. Therefore, the risk is being labeled a cabal. This is written in the slightly telegraphic style of Echo. So I'm going to read it again. Women tend to marry up. Game theoretically, a lineage that could only be passed down through the mother would keep advancing in society, therefore risk being labeled a cabal.
So wait a second. I am confused by the assertion that women tend to marry up. That can't be generally true. Women prioritize marrying up. Am I right? It can't be generally true.
Well, I mean, it's a well-known truism that I feel like I have covered my mic. There we go.
Stop messing with it.
I'm uncovering it, Zachary. That I've lost the plot now. That following from Trivers Willard, that there are going to be a certain number of high quality men out there, and parents who have any control over it. As it turns out, parents seem to, in some species under some conditions, will, knowing that the variance in reproductive success is much lower in women than men, there will be many more women of quality X for whatever character we're talking about in the middle, and men are going to be more likely to be found at the ends. And so women being more likely to be in the middle will tend to be, I mean, especially in sort of bride price and, you know, dowry, polygynous society situations, will be sort of offered up to men of higher quality.
I mean, I still don't get it. It just seems to me, you know, if you have a monogamous system and people are pairing off, that on average it can't be true.
Well, as I said, I mean, I think we're talking about a polygynous system. And I mean, we hear. I have not spent any time with the research, in part because I don't trust it really, because it's going to be sociological largely. But we hear that with regard to, I mean, I guess it's going to vary by character, right? Like, women are more likely to care about indicators of wealth, and men are more likely to care about indicators of fecundity, of beauty and fitness, right? And evolutionary fitness. So, especially as you know, women become more and more educated, there is a smaller pool to choose among their would-be peers, because they're less likely to marry someone who is less educated, who has less capacity to earn than a man is. Whereas if you're looking at simply phenotype, men are more likely to marry up by that characteristic.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the problem you're having with the formulation.
No, I mean, the problem I'm having is solved if it's a polygynous system, and so you can have multiple women technically marrying up, even though what they are now doing is dividing a husband. So what does marrying up mean?
Yeah.
But let's leave that aside and say, if you had a characteristic that was transmitted through the mother, and the mothers are marrying up somehow, does it result in, what was the allegation?
A cabal.
Well, the question is, does it result in I think the question that is being asked is, does it result in some sort of a sublineage that has concentrated something or other?
Well, I mean, maybe the assumption that you are objecting to, that is implicit here, is that the upness of mate choice is inherently genetic, and that especially in humans, many of the characteristics are going to not have been directly genetic, and so it's not going to inherently be lineage in the same way. You won't necessarily get the concentration.
Yeah, I did not take this to be, the cabal question I took not to be about genes. And my assumption is that very little of what marrying up is about genes.
Right, but I mean, the question specifically assumes that game theoretically a lineage that could only be passed down through the mother would keep advancing in society. That sounds like a genetic.
Well, a lineage that could only be passed down through the mother then is confusing. The reason that I thought that lineage that could only be passed down through the mother made sense, is that I think we have a situation like this in killer whales, where you have two distinct niches. You have resident killer whales and transient killer whales, and the babies end up with whatever niche their mother had. If their mother is a transient, they will be transient. But nothing that
Babies
I'm
of both
aware of,
sexes.
nothing that I'm aware of says that the two subspecies or supposed subspecies don't interbreed. So in other words, if the males are not doing any offspring care, which I think they're not, then what is to stop a resident female killer whale from thinking a transient male killer whale is sexy, reproducing, and then raising a resident baby, male or female?
Right.
And so the point is the culture.
And presumably, if these two populations of killer whales exist, kind of side by side, you know, not exactly sympatrically, but maybe actually even sympatrically, they have to be doing that some, or else someone would be calling them different species.
Right. They would produce identifiable characteristics beyond culture.
Right.
So anyway, my point is what is being transmitted there through the female line is orca culture.
Sure.
And so it is I would argue, heritable, even though
Right.
Our colleagues would argue that that's not heritable, because heritable always means genetic, which they are wrong. That's not the right way to do it, but that is the formal definition now. But the point is, in that case, females are passing down something that is heritable or some analog of it that males cannot pass down. And I can't quite map onto that what marrying up. You know, there's no. Yeah. The breeding up. But what is breeding? You know.
Yeah.
Breeding up presumably exists in orcas, but we're not able to identify it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think actually, my beginning to untangle it by character is right. Like certainly there are some individuals who just don't have anything going for them. And, you know, and they could be looking for someone who has something going for them across all the domains, and they've got nothing. But in general, that's not how it is, right? Yep. We're mosaics, and given what, if we're talking about, well, it could be fun to do it in orcas. Like, okay, what do male orcas care about in a female mate? Male orcas are not going to be very choosy because polygynous, because no childcare, et cetera. But in monogamous, at least monogamous-ish species like humans, what the males actually care about and what they say they care about is going to be a pretty good match. And similarly, what the females care about and what they say they care about is going to be pretty much for each other. But those two things are not going to be exactly the same at all.
Well, as between males and females, you've got the character issue that you're talking about. Within males and females, I would argue you don't really need to think on a per character basis, that there should be pretty good agreement between females of a species or between males of a species what the desirable potential mates are. There should be a ranking, and there will be some noise.
I think it depends on it. It's going to depend on environment. You know, if you are a homesteader who's trying to make a living in a place where no one has tried to make a living before.
I'm not, but go on.
You might be looking for a different kind of mate than if you are in Manhattan in the 1980s.
Totally get it. I will take it back and I will say, for a given temporospatial location, there should be pretty good agreement within a sex for the hierarchy of potential mates.
Yeah, but comparing male individuals to female individuals with regard to like breeding, I don't know. I mean, we do this. I'm remembering. I think we've made reference to it before, but that great line from that.
Oh, that terrible sitcom. No,
yeah,
exactly.
So you could do this better than I can.
If I may create this painfully brilliant joke for you, Andy Dick is remarking that he and the colleague comes into the lunchroom and says something to the effect of, "Did you hear that Larry and Cindy got together?" And Andy Dick rolls his eyes and he says, "Oh, they could both do better."
Right.
It's a brilliant joke.
So that's obviously we have it in our heads that that there's up and not so much up.
Yeah.
And there's not total agreement about what's what. All right. Somehow, even though we didn't start with very many questions, we are running out of time. Let's get through a few more. I propose we change the term lab coat wearing scientists to lab coats wearing scientists. Lab coats wearing scientists. Oh, lab coats wearing scientists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that's devastating.
That's great.
Yes,
I like
lab
that.
coats wearing scientists.
Lab coats wearing, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I now imagine the lab coats themselves becoming animate. It's a little scary, but I don't think it's any scarier than the lab coats wearing scientists.
No,
right?
that's
good.
That's pretty darn good.
I like that.
Well played.
Well done. Yeah. What are your thoughts about Chile's death rate among jabbed children and the mainstream media silence on it? I don't know anything about it. First I've heard about it. I don't know anything about it.
I do not know anything about it either.
Okay.
I must tell you, when I started to hear you read the question, I assumed this was about the restaurant, but...
Well, that's actually how it's spelled here.
Oh, they're spelled differently?
They are.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
I don't know how the restaurant is spelled, but it's not spelled like the country, and this is not spelled like the country, so maybe this is spelled a third way.
So, can you read the question again now that I know that we're talking about the country?
I'm assuming that this is about the country, that long, thin one in South America.
Oh, I know the country. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about? I'll pronounce it. All right,
we should stop laughing because it's not a very funny question.
It's not at all.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Chile's death rate among jabbed children and the mainstream silence on it?
Yeah, I mean, we can pretty much infer the story, but I don't think we should because the hazard of it is too great. But
yeah,
there's an awful lot of silence about what seem to be patterns. Maybe Chile has data that Chile has data.
Maybe Chile has data. Sorry.
It's the wrong question to be giddy over, but
no. Yes, it is, and
Yeah.
we don't know anything about it. So we're not going to provide any analysis here.
Yeah.
So.
But I would be interested to know about it if it reveals anything.
Yeah. Okay. There's actually only 4 more questions. We're going to try to get through them, and if someone comes in with another one, maybe we'll get to it. But I don't know what this means. What's a TW? 1 TW dished by Discord because you don't read ahead. Compassion for your censorship gauntlet. Review that question into today's light? ? Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I can't follow that.
I'm sorry,
at
man.
all.
I think it's a guy. I don't know what it means. 1 TW dished by Discord because you don't read ahead. Compassion for your censorship gauntlet. Review that question into today's light? ? I feel like you took several crossword puzzle clues and put them together.
I feel like you took mushrooms and didn't share them.
In which case, cool. Good for you. Yeah, we don't know.
Sorry,
how to parse that.
it sounds like you're trying to convey something, and I don't mean to make light of it. But,
no, and obviously we're just at the end of our seriousness for the day or something. But we don't know what it means. Okay. Can you discuss your understanding of the argument made by some that viruses don't exist? Not really, but we already did that. Also,
We said you don't have to talk about that in the chat.
Okay. Yep. Really, one comment and one more question. So, is there? I'll do the comment first, and then the question. And that's where we'll end for today. The comment is just thank you and take heart. Your voices of sanity have helped so many of us. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed.
That is very meaningful, and we do hear that from people, and we are so grateful because it can be hard, especially given now that we've moved to a place where we run into fewer people. It can be hard to remember when the insanity continues seemingly unabated and with new kinds of force, as in Bret Weinstein, Ben Shapiro, and also Ben Shapiro are voices of vaccine misinformation, and conservatives also.
Yeah, also that.
Except the 2 Ben Shapiros are actually conservatives, but you're not. Okay, final question. Final question. Is there any value whatsoever in cryptozoology, which is, I believe, the study of things like Sasquatch and Yeti and the Loch Ness Monster and what else?
I thought this was about
To some people,
blockchain.
it's going to be viruses. Well, no, viruses aren't animals, so that's not cryptozoology. Cryptobiology, something.
Well, look, we do discover creatures that are unknown periodically. Often that's not that interesting because it's some creature that we thought a frog. It turns out, ultimately, some frog turns out to be two different species, and we didn't realize it. That happens all the time.
And the old maps, the explorers' maps, the European explorers' maps, or before, I actually don't know my cartography history well enough to know, like, when did sort of there be dragons show up sort of over the edge of the world, right? I'm guessing that some early seafarers saw some creatures from the deep that really did exist, and it got instantiated as dragons and encoded on maps. That wasn't entirely we're just guessing that that's where the dragons are going to be, right?
No, I've always taken it to be, there's some cool stuff over there, and I would rather you didn't see it so that I could position myself.
Oh, it's the Waldron Island effect.
It's the Waldron Island effect,
which
yes.
is going to need an explanation here.
So off the northern, there's not really a tip, but the northern edge of Orcas Island
In the archipelago that we live in now.
So Orcas, San Juan, Lopez, and Shaw are the four major ferry-served islands, and then there's Güemes, which is ferry-served by a different ferry system. But those are the big islands that you can get to with a regularly scheduled boat. There are a bunch of other islands that have people living on them that there's no regularly scheduled boat. Waldron is one of them. Waldron is the farthest north in the American side of the archipelago, and its residents, its inhabitants, are not all that wild about newcomers discovering their island and adventuring there or moving there. And so they put up a website in which they described the island for anybody who was curious, and they mentioned the fact that there had been a penitentiary with a prison break in which not all the inmates had ever been found, that there was a
lot of poisonous snakes,
epidemic of rattlesnakes,
Sure.
That it's a desert island.
It's really not much surface water.
Right. They described a hell on earth kind of a scenario.
Deeply improbable if you've ever been to this part of the world at all, on every count.
Yeah.
And in fact, completely untrue.
Right. They did not say there be dragons because presumably people now see through that trick.
Yeah, but so you think that There Be Dragons was a centuries ago version of what the kind-hearted, if somewhat isolationist inhabitants of Waldron Island put up on that website, so many years ago.
Yep. Right. No, totally, yes.
Okay. However, cryptozoology. Any benefit?
Well, it depends what it means. If cryptozoology is like looking for the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, and who else?
All the Bigfoots,
Yeti.
really. Yeah, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. I guess Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same thing, right?
Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same thing. The Yeti, actually, there is some paleontological evidence for something. There's some teeth of Gigantopithecus, is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, I don't know what that story is, but
presumably not coated in white fur. I mean, maybe wearing furs.
there's some creature that put out teeth that we can't match the creature to the teeth.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that is, but is there any value in it? It's probably a waste of time. But there are creatures out there that have never been seen, and every so often, in the deepest jungles of Vietnam, I think there was a small, what was it? A small bovid was not recently, 10 years ago.
A bovid or a cervid, yeah, some kind of ungulate.
I don't think it was a cervid, but anyway, I don't remember. But people do occasionally find things that we don't know anything about. And the question is, what's the opportunity cost of looking for really unlikely finds?
If it can sort of drive you to experience the natural world, right? Like, I don't know. I've not looked into the passion that some people here in the Pacific Northwest have for Sasquatch. I had at least one student at Evergreen whose father was an avid Sasquatch. I don't even know what the word is. Enthusiast. Aficionado, yes. And the student reported that as a child, some of her best times in life were going out on these extended camping trips with her dad. And yes, her dad was driven by a search for Sasquatch, and no, he never found Sasquatch. But it enabled him to develop an amazing relationship with his daughter that might not have happened otherwise. So, if like passions that aren't like passions of all sorts that may not produce more beauty or truth in the world, but which help you sort of organize your world, your frame, so that you are driven to discover other things and make connections with other people. Cool. It's better than sitting around watching useless television.
Yeah, snipe hunt.
Yeah.
So I would also say that there are people, I mean, this is an extension of your point, but there are people, let's say, all postmodernists. We would be better off if they would take up...
They were cryptozoologists.
Cryptozoologists, which would allow them to be good to the people that they love by leaving them alone, going outside, eating freeze-dried food, and well, that's the three.
Yeah.
Be good to the ones that you love
got it.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. You did it.
Not very well, but...
No. So you heard it here first. Bret thinks the postmodernists should become cryptozoologists so that they, like you...
Wait a second.
Zachary,
I missed it.
He missed the cue. I
don't know what...
The postmodernists should become exo-cryptozoologists.
Astro-cryptozoologists?
Yes.
Yeah, quickly.
Immediately. Yeah.
And that will help them.
Yes.
As you should do too.
Yes.
And Zachary should now read the writing on the wall as we advise that in 2 weeks we'll be back. And until then, be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
Be well, everyone.
Yeah, give me a second on that one.
Needs a second. Or more than one.
Maybe we should become cryptozoologists.